Boys, girls, babes, welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. Quick reminder, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so. A lot of you have done so we really appreciate that. But just wanted to remind you once again, I'll remind you every episode, if you have not already done so, please don't forget to click that little subscribe button. We are available across pretty much all major platforms now. So those being, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, etc., etc., etc. There's so many of them now, and we are on practically all of them. So please don't forget to subscribe. And now that we've got that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, again, just wanted to say that, I really do appreciate all of the interest and all of the love that we've been getting lately. I mentioned it during our last episode, but we recently did hit 2,000 downloads with one of our latest episodes. So that is amazing. Very exciting. I was completely blown away by that. This little show that I started pretty much just because I had some free time and I love talking about hockey and I love my Capitals. And now, it's gotten pretty big and I could not be happier about it. And so again, just wanted to, I'll say it over and over and over again, but I just wanted to say it again. Thank you all so much for your continued support. It means a lot, and I love doing the show. And now as far as today's episode, there has been a lot that has happened in the last week or so of Caps hockey. Thankfully, a lot of wins to talk about, a lot of milestones, so pretty much all good things. So let me give you just a little bit of a quick refresher here. Okay, so to sum up, individually, why don't we start with the individual stuff? So probably the biggest thing in the grand scope of the hockey world over the past week was that Alex Ovechkin, he scored his 718th career goal to surpass Hall of Famer Phil Esposito for 6th on the NHL all-time goals list. He scored the goal against his former coach Barry Trotz and Trotz's New York Islanders back on March 16th. That was in a 3-1 win for the Caps. And his goal, naturally, was the game-winning goal because that's just how Alex Ovechkin does things. If he's going to get a milestone, he's going to do it right. If he's going to do a milestone, he's going to do it right. So he gets the game winner, and that game winner won the game for the Caps. It ended the Islanders' 9-game win streak. The Islanders, they'd won 9 games in a row. So that win for the Caps, it catapulted the Caps into first place in the East, and it tied as well for first place in the entire NHL. And as I said, Ovechkin's history-making 718th career goal, it came back just on March 16th. So not a long time ago, just a few days ago, but he has already added 2 more goals since then because, life comes at you fast if you're a goalie in the NHL, and Alex Ovechkin is shooting at you. So Ovi, he also hit 1,300 career points this past week. He actually accomplished that in that same game against Barry Trotz and the New York Islanders, assisting on TJ Oshie's game-opening goal. And he being Ovechkin, he is at 1,303 points now, just 2 games later, like I said. So Nicklas Backstrom, fittingly, he became the man who has played the second most career games as a Washington Capital. Second only, of course, to his line mate, Alex Ovechkin. John Carlson, he hit 500 career points in the NHL, and he is the 3rd fastest active defenseman to hit that mark, doing it in just 783 career games so far. So that's a huge milestone that he's hit very early on here. Should probably have a few Norris trophies by now, hey? But I digress. So anyways, Carlson, he's already at 505 points now because, again, life comes at you fast with this Washington Capitals offense. Evgeny Kuznetsov, he also hit 400 career NHL points. And, I'm sure that I'm missing something else here, but yeah, there's been a lot of milestones in these past few weeks, so we're trying to keep up with them. And I do apologize to anyone whose milestone I may have missed. But those are some of the big ones. And team-wise, the Caps have been, of course, the hottest team in the National Hockey League. They just finished up a 7-game win streak during which they scored 5+ goals in 4 straight games. Captain Alex Ovechkin had 7 goals in 7 games. They are an NHL best 14-3-1 since February 16th. Yes, you've heard that right. They've won 14 of their last 18 games. So that's great. They are the best 5-on-5 team in the NHL. They're the second highest scoring team in the NHL overall, second only to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Funny enough, those two teams were the number 1 and number 2 highest scoring teams in the league last season as well. And yeah, the Caps, they have a top 5 power play, a top 10 penalty kill. So yeah, pretty much like everything is coming up aces for the Caps right now. And like I said, they're in first place because of it. So no complaints. They went 7-0-0 without top-line wing Tom Wilson during his 7-game suspension, and another great showing of these Caps battling through adversity. And then they get him back against the Rangers on Saturday, and the Caps lose that one by a 3-1 score. Really, it was 2-1, but the Rangers added the empty netter, and so, like I said, the Caps' 7-game win streak comes to an end. And like I said, that was on Saturday, which was March 20th, which was my birthday. So wah, 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 wah. Anyways, let's please avoid the blazingly bad "they lost because Tom Wilson came back" takes. Because no, that's not why they lost. So don't do that. Don't be that guy. Unless you're being that guy sarcastically, then that is fine. But in reality, they've really lost this game for 2 reasons. The first being that the second high scoring team in the NHL did not score enough goals. So that's not really a long-term concern. Big picture, right? Unless, of course, you end up playing the New York Rangers in the playoffs, which I would say at this point is rather unlikely. But yeah, the Rangers, really, when you look at it, they're really the only team that the Caps have had even the slightest trouble lighting the lamp against this season, and particularly on the power play. The Caps, they went 0-for-4 on the power play on Saturday, which puts them at 0-for-14 on the power play against the Rangers this season. And that is, of course, interesting because this Capitals power play, like I said, top 5 power play in the entire National Hockey League. They've been downright deadly with it. So the Rangers, they do have the 3rd-ranked penalty kill in the NHL, but still, the Caps power play has had 0 problems against the other top-ranked penalty kills, so it is interesting that they seem to be having trouble with the Rangers unit specifically. So something to keep an eye on, but like I said, not much to be concerned about, unless, of course, the Rangers find a way to claw themselves into the playoffs. And even on Saturday, yes, the boys in red did go 0-for-4, but when you actually watch their power play opportunities on Saturday, the Caps had some great looks. Ovechkin, he rang another one off of the pipe, etc. They were really moving the biscuit around with authority and generating some great looks. They just happened to not go in. So it wouldn't be time to panic for me yet, even if we did end up seeing the Rangers in the playoffs. I still think that the Caps have too much talent on that power play. And they work too well together. They would find a way to be successful against the Rangers unit if they had to game plan for a playoff series. And to me, in that game on Saturday, like I said, as long as you're generating the scoring chances and getting great looks like that, you don't have to be and shouldn't be concerned, because when you can throw that much talent out onto the ice, more times than not, when you are getting those looks, they're going to hit the back of the net. But it was not their day on Saturday. Maybe it was time, like I said, for the Caps to lose the game. Like we mentioned, they had won 7 straight, so why not drop the one on my birthday? That's par for the course for how 2020 and 2021 so far is going for me, so that's to be expected, I think. So it's my fault, you guys. I am the jinx. But yeah, anyways, I said there were 2 reasons why the Caps lost this game, neither of which were Tom Wilson, who had an assist on the Caps' only goal, by the way. But yeah, the second reason was that defenseman Brenden Dillon, he does kind of a toe pick and falls down in his own zone, giving the puck to Mika Zibanejad to break in all alone and score the game winner with 2 minutes left in the game. That one hurt. So on this play, right, there's an obvious play that Dillon should make, and that's to simply just reverse it over to his safety outlet, which was Nick Dowd, who was positioned perfectly along the boards to give him that outlet, and then it's an easy exit pretty much of the zone from there, right? So I have no idea why Dillon decides to instead carry the puck deeper back into his own zone. But, shit happens. So maybe he thought Zibanejad already had the angle and was cutting off that outlet pass over to the boards. But whatever, let's not pick on Brenden Dillon, who has in general been great ever since being traded to the Caps at last season's trade deadline. I don't really want to, I don't want to kick a good player while he's down. And I certainly do not want to hear about Corsi this, Corsi that, blah, 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 after this play, not in this situation. I just don't want to hear it. Corsi has absolutely nothing to do with this play. He caught a rut in the ice and he toe picked. Could he have made a better decision with the puck immediately before that? Of course he could have. But in general, Dillon is a guy who 99 times out of 100, he makes the right decisions. That's why the Caps traded for him. And as far as the toe pick, that could have happened to me, to you, to Alex Ovechkin, to Nicholas Backstrom. It could have happened to Bobby frickin' Orr, for Christ's sake. It could have happened to anyone. And it does happen. Several times a week, and to several great players all across the league. So it's certainly unfortunate that it's magnified for Dillon here because of the situation, because of the kind of totality of the circumstances, because it's 2 minutes left in the game, because Zibanejad scores off of the turnover, because the goal turns out to be the game winner, because it does end a 7-game win streak for the Caps. The circumstances are very unfortunate. But yeah, in terms of if you were to look at it as an isolated incident and just toe picking and giving the other team the puck, happens all the time. And like I said, do not talk to me about Corsi here. It's got nothing to do with Corsi. I'm seeing this all over social media, everyone, talking about how Brenden Dillon, his Corsi, it sucks, blah, blah, blah. I remember everyone ragging on Brooks Orpik's Corsi stats too, right before he helped us win the Stanley Cup. We all remember that, right? I think, right? Pepperidge Farm remembers. So again, don't be that guy. There are situations, of course, where Corsi is useful. I like it when it's used in context. So yeah, like I said, there are situations where Corsi is useful, but this is not one of them. And it isn't the be all end all anyway. It has to be used in proper context and kind of with the other stats to go along with it. So, yeah, just don't want to hear it. The reason why I'm bringing it up too is because, like I said, it's all over social media. Fans just shitting all over Brenden Dillon. And it's kind of one of those things where it's people are talking about Corsi now. It has nothing to do with Corsi. He caught a rut in the ice and he toe picked. It could happen to anyone. But yeah, that about sums up that game on Saturday for the Caps. They played relatively well, in terms of just how they kind of locked things down. It was a pretty quick and a pretty exciting, entertaining game for being a 1-1 score through most of the game. I thought both teams were really moving their feet. Both teams were, getting the puck up and out very quickly. High transition game, lots of chances both ways, but just none finding the back of the net. So for it being a 1-1 score through most of the game, it was quite exciting, quite entertaining hockey. But yeah, the Caps, they just don't get it done. And that, of course, ends their 7-game win streak. So like I said, happy birthday to me. It's okay though. They'll get right back at it on Thursday against the New Jersey Devils. They have a bit of a break, obviously, some days off before the next game. So, but yeah, it's okay. Everyone has to lose a game sometimes, even the Caps. I just wish, like I said, that it was not on my birthday. Okay, but we finished kind of getting you all up to date. We finished recapping and kind of just going over. Like I said, there was a lot of milestones that took place over the last week, so we wanted to give some shout outs to some players for some of those. Like I said, I probably missed some, but hopefully I got the most important ones, the biggest ones. But so you know what time it is now, Caps fans. hockey fans, all of our valued listeners. It's time for our new segment, which is Onside, Offside, which aired for the first time last week, and which has already been a huge success. We're getting tons of responses to it, so love to see that. So if you missed it last week, it works like this. So our listeners send us what they want answered for Onside, Offside, whether, it can be questions or opinions about the Caps, about other teams around the league, about certain individual players, about a borderline hit, about any supplemental discipline or non-discipline from the league. It can be about playoff races, awards races, anything. Anything. It can be anything that you want it to be. So you send us what you want answered. You can either email us at JaneaTalksCaps@gmail.com. Again, that's JaneaTalksCaps@gmail.com. Or you can get a hold of us via social media, either our Facebook page or our Twitter or our Instagram, whatever it may be. And we will tell you whether we think that this is onside or offside, with onside being that we agree with whatever it is, and with offside being that we do not agree with whatever it is, sometimes strongly do not agree. So here's an example. So like if you ask me, hey, Janaea, onside or offside, Crosby is a whiny bitch, I would say onside, i.e. I agree with that statement. Okay, I think we all understand. So first up, we've got Kara, who reaches out to us via Twitter, and she wants to know, hey, Janaea, onside or offside, Crosby whining to the league about Tanev getting a penalty for boarding Jared Tenorti. Okay, so that's kind of ironic because I just used Crosby whining as an example, but that's okay. Okay, so Kara. I've got a lot of opinions about this one. Just taking a quick look at your Twitter here, as I was just curious. It looks like you're a Boston Bruins fan, so I love that we have fans from other teams listening to our show. It's awesome, and we welcome you all here. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for sending in your question for onside, offside. Okay, so the reason why I kind of wanted to make mention that you're a Bruins fan as well is because my answer is going to have a lot to do with what happened in that Capitals versus Bruins game a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure we all know what I'm referring to, but for me, Crosby whining here in this situation, or anytime really, but especially in this situation, is offside. And I will tell you why. So first things first, Brenden Tanev, he got the penalty for boarding, and when you look at the hit, by the NHL's own definition, this was much more boarding than the hit that Caps forward Tom Wilson made against your own Bruins, Brandon Carlo. Which of course saw Wilson get suspended for a whopping 7 games for so-called boarding. Now, we all hope, of course, that Brandon Carlo is okay. That's obvious, that should go without saying. And including, by the way, Tom Wilson, who apparently did text Carlo the very next morning to make sure that he was all right. Wilson didn't want that outcome from that hit, but that's beside the point. We've already talked at length about why Wilson shouldn't have been suspended. We don't need to get into it even more. I don't want to get off track here. But the reason why I do bring up and have to bring up Wilson's hit on Carlo is because we never hear a peep from Crosby or from anyone in the Penguins organization regarding anything to do with supplemental discipline being inconsistent, because it always seems to benefit them, right? Like, that's why we never hear from them on the subject. The NHL, like the Department of Player Safety, it's always inconsistent. It's always been inconsistent. But when it benefits them, when it benefits the Penguins, then they aren't saying a word. Now, here, we have the first time that I can recall in recent memory where the Penguins have a call that they don't agree with. And Tanev, he didn't get any supplemental discipline for the hit, by the way. There was no suspension, no fine, no nothing. It was just the penalty in game, the 5-minute major in the game misconduct. But still, Crosby and the Penguins feel that somehow makes them persecuted. So whatever, I don't know. So the first time that a call of any sort goes against them, Crosby and his cronies are lining up at the league's head office to file their complaints. So again, the reason that I had to bring up, like I said, Tom Wilson, was that we don't hear a peep from Crosby, from anyone in the entire Penguins organization, whenever the league's inconsistencies are punishing Tom Wilson and the Caps or punishing anyone else unjustly. They only give a shit the one time that it finally affects them. Now, I, myself, I whine about the league's inconsistencies, all of the time. Like, not just when it's affecting Tom Wilson or affecting the Caps, but when it's affecting anybody, because bullshit is bullshit. It doesn't matter which team you root for. So I think I am very consistent in my pointing out of the league's inconsistencies. I don't really care who it's affecting negatively. I would just like to see things be more consistent. But the Penguins, they are the complete opposite. Tom Wilson gets a 7-game suspension for a non-board. They love it over there. Like, they love it. They make arrogant comments about him and how he should know better, blah, 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 blah. Penguins fans love it too. Like, they're kind of like rejoicing at this point, like that the league is inconsistent as hell, really, in doling out their, discipline. But everything is hunky-dory. Everything is great because it's only hurting the Caps. It's not hurting the Penguins. And so that's perfect for them. So they're like, keep it up with the inconsistency. It's going great for our Penguins. But now, Brenden Tanev gets an in-game penalty for an actual board. Again, like by the NHL's own definition, this was much more of a board than the one that Tom Wilson threw. And suddenly, this is some great injustice, and the league is so inconsistent. And, it's unacceptable and blah, 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 blah. So again, no supplemental discipline for Tanev. No suspension, no fine, nothing extra on top of the penalty that he received in game. But yes, Crosby, y'all are so persecuted. We feel so bad for you. Give me a fucking break, man. That is offside, Sid. And for what it's worth, I thought that the Tanev one was not suspension worthy. And I also thought, likewise, that the Wilson one was not suspension worthy either. So I simply wish for consistency. I don't wish for just only Penguins players to be getting suspended or to be getting penalties or whatever. I just want it to be consistent, folks. But Sid and the Penguins, on the other hand, they wish for inconsistency to only benefit them and no one else. And that's why this is offside from Sidney Crosby. And Pens fans, it's pretty simple, right? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want Tom Wilson suspended for every hit that he throws, then you can't cry foul, whenever one of your own gets hit with just a 5-minute major in a game misconduct, for crying out loud. Like, grow some balls, okay? It's time. Okay. Thank you, Kara, for writing in with that question. And thank you, as always, for listening. Next up... Let me just scroll through here. Next up, we have Oscar, a self-proclaimed Canucks fan, and he's writing in rather simply. Just wants to know one thing, really. He says, "Hey, Janaea, is Quinn Hughes the worst defenseman in the NHL?" Well, are we talking defensively? Because yes. I'm going to leave it at that. Watch him play. You know the answer. We all do. Listen, I live in Vancouver. I have Sportsnet, so I see a lot of Canucks games. There's no hiding from me, Quinn, okay? He has been terrible. Minus 15 now on the season, I believe. And listen, we all know, plus minus, obviously, it's not the be-all, end-all stat. It has to be used in context, just like Corsi does. It has to be used in conjunction with other things, such as the good old-fashioned eyeball test, for one, right? But when you watch this guy play, the eyeball test matches the plus-minus rating. It really does. He is a train wreck defensively. And listen, the fact that it's a Canucks fan asking if Quinn Hughes is the worst defenseman in the NHL, that should tell you everything. Because this is not, it's not a Flames or an Oilers fan writing in asking with their tongue in their cheek, right? It's a Canucks fan asking this question. So a guy is putting up 3/4 of a point per game from the back end for your team. You should love that guy. And if you don't love him, well, then obviously there's something going terribly wrong on the defensive side of the puck to make it so that his offensive output is not even worth it. So trust the Canucks fan who asks the question, and trust me, who living in Vancouver has seen 100 times already this season, every time that he's, and there's been so many of them, every time that he's fucking up and the puck ends up directly in the back of the Canucks net. So, Quinn Hughes, the worst defenseman in the NHL. That's an onside for me, dog. And okay, thank you very much to Oscar for writing in, and thank you for listening to our show as well. We really appreciate you. And finally, we have Ian, who writes in by email, and he says, hey, Janaea, love the podcast and love the Caps insight. I'm a Rangers fan from DC. Family is from NY, so I'm very familiar with both teams. Assuming that the Penguins are moving into retirement homes soon, and the Bruins being somewhat older as well, how long is it before the Rangers become one of the best in the division? As always, keep up the great work. Okay. So hi, Ian. First of all, thank you so much for your support and for your kind words. Thank you for listening to our show. And thank you for writing us today. Great question as well. And I know a lot of Rangers fans are probably wondering the same thing. So for me, every time that the Rangers have played the Caps this season, they've played them very hard, and the Rangers have looked pretty great in those games. The Caps have had some trouble with the Rangers for sure, which I highlighted a bit at the beginning of the show. So for me, I can definitely see the potential of the Rangers, and I had actually mentioned it in an earlier podcast episode. I had mentioned that I think it was in our season preview special, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I had actually touched on the fact that I thought the Rangers maybe could grab a playoff spot as soon as this season. We knew it was going to be tough for them. They are playing in a very difficult division, the toughest division in hockey, and that's just kind of bad luck for them, bad luck of the draw. But I did think that they could get in this season if things went well for them. And maybe they still can. They're not out of it yet, especially not with the way that teams like the Flyers and the Bruins have been faltering of late. So anything can still happen here, especially since you're only playing within your own division during this pandemic season. Your destiny is a lot more in your own hands than it normally would be, because you can beat those teams who are in front of you in the standings. You can beat them over and over and over again because you're playing them so many times, and you can really make up ground pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, for the Rangers, I did think that they would be ahead of where they are now. And of course, a big part of that was that I thought that Alexis Lafreniere was going to be a lot better than he's been. I thought that he was going to come in and immediately be a 60-point guy instead of a 20-point guy. So he's been a big surprise so far, in a bad way for the Rangers. A lot of outlets are already writing their, if you redid the 2020 draft today, articles, and, they're all saying that Tim Stützle and Quinton Byfield would have gone ahead of him, which I think, it's just way too early to make that determination, to make that statement. Although Tim Stützle is certainly a hell of a player. But yeah, for myself as well, living up here in Canada, Lafreniere was so overhyped in the media up here. You would have thought that he was the second coming of Wayne Gretzky coming in. They're comparing him in this era to as if he's like an Alex Ovechkin or a Sidney Crosby number one overall type coming in. And I mean, Ovi and Sid were both putting up 100 plus points in their rookie seasons, right? So Alex Ovechkin, I believe, scored 52 goals in his rookie season. So those comparisons just don't make sense to me. And so I'm not sure if some of that stuff might have gone to Lafreniere's head. I don't know. But he hasn't been what the Rangers had hoped that they were getting, certainly, at least not so far. But obviously, there's still a lot of time left for him to prove that he can turn into that guy. And I mean, like, even if he turns into half of what an Alex Ovechkin or a Sidney Crosby has been, then I think we can all agree that the Rangers would be in very good shape. But yeah, like, I wasn't expecting an Alex Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby like performance from Lafreniere. I thought that that was just ridiculous, like I said, for the media to make those comparisons. But I was basing my hypothesis that the Rangers could get into the playoffs this season off of thinking that Lafreniere was going to come in and put up somewhere around a 60-point pace, like I said, at least, over a full season. But he really hasn't been anywhere near that mark, and so the Rangers aren't anywhere near as close to a playoff spot as I would have thought that they would be, or could be with his help. But yeah, I mean, like, when you look at the future, because I think that's what you're more concerned about as a Rangers fan, right? So I think that the Rangers are obviously in a really good spot. They've got a lot of really young, real good talent. I especially love Igor Shesterkin in goal. I think he's awesome. He's probably going to be manning the Rangers cage for a long time. Keandre Miller, really nice player. He's already making a big impact on the back end there, and I think that he as well will be doing that for a long time to come. And then you pair him with Adam Fox back there, and you've got two of the best young defensemen in the league. So they are very young on the back end, but they've got a nice stabilizing presence in a guy like Jacob Trouba too. Brendan Smith is UFA after this season. So I do think that they could definitely add a veteran or two to the mix back there just to kind of stabilize things. If they're wanting to contend sooner rather than later, and B, just kind of to bring some experience to the back end, kind of give the young kids someone to look up to, someone to learn from, right? That's never a bad thing. But yeah, I mean, I really don't think that they have to change too much moving forward. Like, just yet let the young guys develop. They have a really nice group of forwards, most of them young as well. And obviously, so long as Artemi Panarin is in his prime, then you have that bona fide game breaker in your lineup as well, which is obviously very important come playoff time, especially. So I think that the Rangers should be looking to make the most of this window in the next few years, where Panarin is still in his scoring prime, still an elite player in the league. And yeah, like, don't give the other teams around you too much respect either, right? Like, grab the bull by the horns if you can. Some of these teams in this division right now that have been so elite for so long, some of them are starting to become a little bit vulnerable right now. And you touched on it, Ian. Like, the two that are definitely starting to show their age are the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Boston Bruins. And like, I'm not ready to write off either of those teams as of yet. That wouldn't be wise, probably. The Penguins in particular have come back from the dead far too many times already. But yeah, I mean, like, when you watch them, they just don't look like the same teams that they've been in the past. The Penguins don't look nearly as quick as they always had been. Crosby and Malkin's production is starting to slow. They've got questions in goal and have had questions in goal really ever since letting Marc-Andre Fleury go to the Vegas Golden Knights, that being prior to the 2017-2018 season. Fleury, of course, he took the Knights all the way to the Stanley Cup final that season, where they would thankfully eventually lose to my Washington Capitals. But yeah, he got them an expansion team all the way to the Cup final. And Pittsburgh has been struggling in goal ever since he left, and they really haven't been able to find a real solution. It came out that Jim Rutherford, before leaving the Penguins as their general manager, it came out that before he left, he was really trying to get Marc-Andre Fleury back in Pittsburgh, to trade to get him back, which I thought was pretty hilarious because you let him go for nothing and now you're trying to give up the farm to get him back. But Vegas wouldn't do it anyway. So, and then the Boston Bruins. Oh, the Boston Bruins, when you watch them, like, they have got to be the slowest team in the National Hockey League, and it's starting to catch up to them numbers-wise, as they haven't been able to score any goals this season. They're 23rd out of 31 teams in the league in scoring this season, and it's even worse at even strength, where they are 30th out of 31 teams. So when you talk about the Bruins being an elite team, I think that's pretty much over right now. At least for the time being, unless, of course, they prove me wrong. But, like, the only reason that the Bruins really are still a playoff team right now is because of their goaltending. And both Tuukka Rask and Jaroslav Halak are certainly on the back nine of their careers. There's questions whether either of them will be back for the Bruins next season. They're both UFA at the end of this season, so if they lose those guys in net, or if those guys simply start to let in more pucks because they're aging, and if the Bruins can't figure out their scoring issues, watch out. They could be on the outside looking in at the playoff race as soon as next season. But yeah, like some of these teams who have been, like I said, elite for so long, they're vulnerable now. And so whenever the Penguins and the Bruins do get pushed out of playoff contention, whether it's next season or not, whenever it does happen, I'm sure we will all be very sad to see them go. No sarcasm there at all. And that means that there will be room at the top for someone else, right? And I could easily see that team being the New York Rangers. I would even say that it's more likely than not. So yeah, to answer your question, Ian, kind of rambling here now, but for me, you are on side with this one. The Rangers will be one of the best teams in their division in the near future. How soon into the future probably depends upon exactly what you mentioned, which is how quickly will teams like the Boston Bruins and the Pittsburgh Penguins fall out of contention due to aging. We will probably see the usual divisions come back into play as soon as next season as well. So that would see, obviously, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Columbus Blue Jackets being swapped back into the Metropolitan Division in place of the Bruins and the Buffalo Sabres. But for now, the Bruins are in our division, and so we'll treat it as such. So I don't think it will really matter who is in the Rangers division anyway, as I think that they're going to be a very good team and be near the top of their division regardless of who the competition is. They have a lot of good young players, like I mentioned. It bodes very well for their future no matter who the competition is. So yeah, if the Rangers don't make the playoffs this season, I would say they're making the playoffs next season, and I think they'll be a top team in the division as soon as this season after that, which would be the 2022-2023 season. And it should hopefully be, nothing but fun times for you guys from there on out. They probably have a lot of years of being a top team to come up here, assuming that their management doesn't screw anything up. But yeah, so a big thank you to Ian and to everyone else who wrote to us this week with their questions for Onside, Offside. That wraps up today's segment. I do apologize to anyone whose questions we didn't get to today. We try to get to as many of them as possible. Obviously I tend to ramble too much sometimes, so it takes us a little longer to get through the questions. We got to 3 of them today. But I do like to give informed answers as well. I don't just want to, just blast through them and not give any reasoning for why I'm saying something's onside versus offside. So, but yeah, we'll get to more next week. And that wraps up our show for today. So again, thank you all very much for listening. We really appreciate you. Make sure, like I mentioned right off the top of the show here, make sure to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Like I said, I'd remind you again at the end of the show. So, we are available, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Podcast Addict rather. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you would get your podcast from, we are on there. So subscribe. Share us with your family and your friends and your fellow Caps fans, your fellow hockey fans in general, even any Penguins or Bruins fans, if you want to piss them off talking about how old their teams are and how they're going to suck soon. Anyways, so yeah, share us around, folks. Thanks again. We will talk to you all next week. And until then, babes, you stay classy, you stay healthy, you stay safe. And as always, let's go Caps.